Welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be exploring something that I think really captures the imagination. The connection between the Tartarian architecture conspiracy theory and the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. It's kind of a mix of history, architecture, and, you know, a good dose of mystery. So it's really perfect for anyone who loves to dig a little deeper into the past. We'll be looking at an analysis of an article that discusses these very topics. So let's get started.
Yeah, it is a fascinating area to explore, especially for anyone who's ever looked at, like a grand old building and wondered, like, how on earth did they build that?
Exactly. And that sense of awe is what fuels a lot of the Tartarian theory. It claims that this technologically advanced civilization called Tartaria was wiped from history. Proponents point to things like oversized doors and intricate designs, found in these historical structures as evidence of, say, giants or some kind of lost technology.
Yeah. What's really interesting is the question behind this theory. Why would history hide such a civilization? And what happened to their amazing buildings? This idea of a lost civilization. It
Yeah.
really resonates with a lot of people. And it's here that the World's Fair becomes relevant.
So let's travel back to 1893 to Jackson Park in Chicago. Picture 690 acres transformed into this dazzling white city, full of these, seemingly magnificent structures, buildings like the administration building, the agricultural building, and the liberal arts building, all showcasing the progress of the age. The fair even debuted the Ferris wheel and electric lights, really changing how people saw city life.
Yeah, it's easy to see how the fair's grandeur, it could capture the imagination, much like the Tartarian theory does.
Yeah.
But here's the twist. Those stunning buildings, they were actually temporary, made mostly of plaster and wood scaffolding.
Wait, temporary? So they weren't actually made of marble and stone?
No. They used techniques like pneumatic spray painting to achieve that pristine white look, which was a revolutionary approach at the time. So what appeared to be these, grand, enduring structures were intentionally designed to be ephemeral.
That's fascinating. I mean, this contrast that these buildings were meant to embody progress and innovation, yet they were inherently temporary. It's almost like they were making a statement about progress itself, always changing, always moving forward. Does this tie into the Tartarian theory somehow?
It does, in
Yeah.
a way. Think about it. If something so grand can be created and then deliberately dismantled, doesn't that feed into the idea that history can be manipulated or erased? That's a concept that plays directly into the Tartarian theory's narrative of a hidden past.
It makes you think about what we choose to preserve
Yeah.
and what we allow to fade away. It goes beyond just buildings. It's about how we remember the past. How do you think, listener? Have you ever felt a sense of loss when a landmark was demolished? Maybe a building that held personal significance for you, or represented a piece of your local history?
Yeah, I think the feeling of loss when a piece of history disappears is quite powerful. It speaks to this human desire for continuity, for a connection to the past, and that yearning for a connection is something that the Tartarian theory really taps into, offering this narrative, however improbable, that fills in the gaps and provides a sense of meaning to what feels lost.
It's interesting how the destruction of monumental architecture, whether real or imagined, can spark these kinds of theories. But let's shift gears for a moment and talk about the architectural influences that shaped the World's Fair. Because, believe it or not, those temporary structures were inspired by very real European traditions.
Right, the Chicago World's Fair, it was heavily influenced by the Beaux-Arts architectural style,
Yeah.
particularly as it was popular in France's Second Empire. Daniel Burnham, the chief architect, he had assembled a team of architects who had trained in Paris. They wanted to recreate that same grandeur in America.
So they were bringing a bit of Europe to Chicago. What was it about the Beaux-Arts style that they wanted to replicate?
Well, the Beaux-Arts style, it emphasized grandeur symmetry and elaborate ornamentation. Think of it as a celebration of classical forms, but with a more modern sensibility. It was about creating a sense of awe and wonder, which certainly aligns with the World's Fair's objectives.
And that fascination with Beaux-Arts architecture is what fueled the City Beautiful movement in the United States, right? This whole idea of using grand architectural designs to beautify American cities.
Exactly. The World's Fair acted like a grand debut for this movement. The hope was to elevate not just the physical appearance of cities, but also their civic pride. We can see the movement's legacy in cities like Philadelphia, Detroit, and Washington, D.C., all of which adopted aspects of this grand European-inspired design.
That's an interesting legacy. On one hand, the City Beautiful movement brought about some truly stunning urban landscapes. But was it all positive? I mean, these projects often involved major changes to existing cityscapes.
That's a great point. And it's something we need to unpack. The movement, while visually appealing, sometimes neglected the needs and character of existing communities. There's a tension there, a need to balance aesthetic aspirations with the realities of social impact.
Can you give us a specific example of how this tension played out?
Certainly. Consider Philadelphia's Benjamin Franklin Parkway, a magnificent boulevard. But its construction involved displacing entire neighborhoods, disrupting lives and communities in the process. While the parkway is undoubtedly a beautiful addition to the city, it serves as a reminder that progress and beauty can sometimes come at a cost.
It's like imposing a vision of beauty rather than integrating it. With what's already there, it makes you question the motives behind these grand designs. Was it purely about aesthetics, or were there other agendas at play?
That's an excellent question, and it leads us to a deeper examination of urban design. Was it ever truly just about beauty? Or were there often underlying political and social forces shaping these decisions?
This is where things start to get really interesting. The idea that city planning isn't just about aesthetics, but also about control and power. It's making me think about those Parisian boulevards we mentioned earlier. There's more to that story, isn't there?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. To bring up those Parisian boulevards, they're a perfect example of how urban design can reflect more than just, aesthetic preferences. Those wide-sweeping avenues, so iconic of Paris, they weren't just created for beauty. They were also strategically designed during Napoleon III's reign.
So there's a darker side to their creation. What was the purpose behind this design choice?
Well, Napoleon III, he was concerned about urban uprisings, which had been a problem in Paris earlier in the century. And those grand boulevards, they made it much harder for people to erect barricades and easier for troops to move quickly through the city. So they were, in a way, a tool for social control.
Wow, that's a chilling thought. Something that appears beautiful and elegant on the surface, actually having such a calculated purpose beneath it. It makes you wonder if the people strolling along those boulevards were even aware of this hidden agenda.
Yeah, it is a powerful example of how design can be used to subtly influence behavior and reinforce power structures. And it challenges us to think critically about the motivations behind urban planning decisions.
Right. It makes me think back to the City Beautiful movement in the U.S. On the surface, it seemed to promote democratic ideals, civic pride, and a vision of a more beautiful and harmonious urban life. But considering what we just discussed about those Parisian boulevards, it makes you wonder if there was a disconnect between the stated goals and the reality of its implementation.
That's a very perceptive observation. Well, the City Beautiful movement in the U.S., it arose from different historical circumstances. The Napoleon III's Paris. It is crucial to consider, the potential impact of its design choices. Were those grand boulevards and imposing civic centers in American cities also perhaps unintentionally shaping social behavior and reinforcing existing power dynamics?
It's interesting to consider this connection. We often think of architecture and urban planning as neutral elements, but they're clearly not. They embody values, ideologies, and historical narratives.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to be critical thinkers, to question assumptions, and to consider multiple perspectives. Whether we're analyzing ancient civilizations or the design of our own cities, there's always more to the story than meets the eye. This brings us back to the allure of the Tartarian conspiracy theory. It speaks to our desire to uncover those hidden narratives, to challenge the official version of history.
It's like people are searching for a deeper explanation, a hidden truth that perhaps challenges the accepted narrative. Do you think this is why these theories gain traction, particularly when discussing architectural marvels that seem to defy conventional explanations?
I think you've hit on something important, the Tartarian theory. While lacking credible evidence, it highlights a fundamental human desire to question, to explore, and to seek alternative explanations. It reminds us that history is not always straightforward, and that there are often multiple interpretations of events.
So how do we reconcile this desire for exploration and questioning with the need for factual accuracy and critical analysis? It seems like a delicate balance.
It is a delicate balance. On one hand, we should encourage curiosity and critical thinking. It's essential to question the narratives we're given and to explore alternative viewpoints. But on the other hand, we need to ground our explorations in evidence logic and a healthy dose of skepticism. It's about seeking truth while acknowledging that truth can be complex and multifaceted.
I think that's a valuable lesson for anyone interested in history architecture, or really any field where narratives are constructed and interpreted. We need to be aware of our own biases, the limitations of our knowledge, and the potential for manipulation or misinterpretation.
Absolutely. And we need to be open to changing our minds when presented with new evidence or compelling arguments.
Yeah.
The pursuit of knowledge is a journey, not a destination.
Well said. I think we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, from conspiracy theories to world fairs to the complexities of urban planning. It's been quite a journey.
It certainly has, and I think it highlights the interconnectedness
That's
of
right.
seemingly disparate topics. We've seen how architecture can reflect social and political forces, how history can be interpreted in multiple ways, and how the desire to understand the past can lead us down unexpected paths.
It's amazing how this conversation has connected these seemingly separate ideas. Tartarian conspiracy theories, the grandeur of the Chicago World's Fair, and the complexities of urban design. It's like we've been peeling back layers of history, revealing these hidden connections and unexpected perspectives.
Right, and what I find so fascinating is how they all touch upon this idea of narrative control and interpretation.
Yeah.
You know who decides what stories are told? Whose vision of the past and future shapes our present? And perhaps most importantly, what happens when those narratives are challenged or even erased?
That's a thought-provoking question. It makes you wonder, what stories are we missing out on? What perspectives haven't been fully explored? And how does the destruction of architecture, whether real or imagined, contribute to the rise of alternative theories like the Tartarian narrative?
Well, the loss of physical structures. If that can fuel these alternative histories,
Yeah.
then perhaps it's a signal that we need to reevaluate how we preserve our collective memory. How do we ensure that a diverse range of voices and perspectives
Yeah.
are represented in our understanding of the past?
It's almost like a challenge to be more conscious of the stories that are embedded in our surroundings, to actively engage with history, and to critically examine the narratives that we're presented with.
Exactly. It's not just about preserving grand monuments and iconic structures. It's also about valuing the everyday spaces
Yeah.
that make up the fabric of our communities, the places where people live, work, and interact. These spaces hold personal memories and reflect the diversity of human experience.
It's about recognizing that history isn't just about these grand narratives. It's also about the individual lives and stories that shape our collective understanding of the past.
Absolutely. And it's in preserving those stories, those often overlooked narratives, that we can create a more complete and nuanced understanding of history. It's about ensuring that future generations have access to a richer and more multifaceted view of the past.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what would you say is the most crucial point for our listener to take away? What can we do to be better stewards of our historical heritage and ensure that those forgotten voices are heard?
I think it starts with recognizing that every structure, every street, every park tells a story. It's about being curious and seeking out those stories, especially the ones that have been marginalized or silenced. It's about looking beyond the surface and understanding the deeper context.
It's about digging deeper, asking questions, and not taking things at face value. And it's about being more inclusive in our approach to preservation, recognizing the value of all types of spaces and stories.
Yeah, and it's about understanding that the stories we tell about our past shape how we see the present and imagine the future. By being more conscious of those stories, by being willing to challenge the accepted narratives, we can contribute to a more inclusive, accurate, and equitable understanding of history.
That's a great point to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Tartarian architecture theory, the Chicago World's Fair, and the complex legacy of urban planning. We hope you'll continue to explore these topics, challenge assumptions, and seek out those hidden stories that enrich our understanding of the world around us.